I'm 25, and I've been living in Astoria, Queens, for about 3 years now. I moved here after finishing school because I thought I'd find something in marketing, but the job market is what it is. So I ended up taking a job with a private security firm. It's not the most exciting career path, but it pays the rent and the benefits are actually decent. My job is basically sitting in a small, windowless room in a basement near Grand Central Terminal and watching monitors for several properties in Midtown Manhattan. Most of the buildings are just standard office towers, but there's one specifically that has been a bit of a headache for me lately. The building I'm talking about is an old Art Deco tower on Lexington Avenue. It's the one with the green scaffolding around the base and the boarded-up revolving doors. It used to be a headquarters for some insurance company, but it's been closed for renovations for about 4 years. Because of some legal issues with the contractors and the city, the work has been stalled for a long time. It's mostly just an empty shell right now, filled with dust, rolls of carpet, and half-finished drywall. My firm is responsible for making sure nobody breaks in to steal copper pipes, or for people experiencing homelessness to find a place to sleep. I work the graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's usually very quiet. I spend most of my time drinking lukewarm coffee from the 24-hour sandwich shop, with the neon open sign that flickers and scrolling through my phone. I have about 16 different feeds on my main screen. One of those feeds is for the lobby of that empty tower on Lexington. There are also cameras on the 42nd floor, which is the top level, mostly just to monitor the roof access. About 3 weeks ago, I noticed something weird on the logs. The system we use flags any motion or elevator activity. On the digital display for the elevator status in that building, I saw that the car was moving. This shouldn't be possible. The building has been disconnected from the main power grid for over a year. There's a small backup generator that runs the emergency lights and the security cameras, but that's it. The elevators are huge, old-fashioned traction models that require a massive amount of electricity to move. The breakers for the elevator motor room on the roof were pulled and tagged out months ago. I checked the maintenance logs myself. Every night, exactly at 3:03 a.m., the digital indicator for the elevator in the lobby starts to change. It goes from G to 1, then 2, and so on, all the way up to 42. It takes about 2 minutes to get to the top. It stays there for about 4 minutes, and then it comes back down to the ground floor. It's been happening every single night. At first, I figured it was just a glitch in the software. Our systems are pretty old, and the sensors in those buildings are prone to shorting out, especially with the humidity and the lack of climate control. I reported it to my supervisor, a guy named Mike, who's been with the company for 20 years. He just told me to ignore it. He said the wiring in those old buildings is a mess, and the ghost signals happen all the time when the backup generator cycles. He didn't seem worried, so I tried not to be either. But then I started looking closer at the actual video feeds, not just the digital logs. The camera in the lobby is pointed directly at the bank of 4 elevators. They are the kind with the heavy, bronze-colored doors that have been scratched up over the decades. At 3:03 a.m., I watched the screen. The light above the second elevator door, the one that indicates the floor, actually lit up. It was a dim, orange glow. I watched the little needle on the analog dial above the door move slowly from left to right. It wasn't a software glitch. The physical hardware in the lobby was reacting. I decided to go over there last Tuesday. I told Mike I was going on my break and that I'd be back in 45 minutes. It's only about a 10-minute walk from where I'm stationed. Manhattan at 2:45. AM is a strange place. It's never truly quiet, but the energy is different. I walked past the large pharmacy with the 24-hour clinic and turned onto Lexington. The building looked completely dead. The green scaffolding cast long, weird shadows across the sidewalk. I have a master key card and a physical key for the side entrance, which is a heavy steel door next to a small shop that sells overpriced luggage and handbags. I let myself in and turned on my heavy-duty flashlight. The air inside was thick and smelled like wet concrete and old dust. It was cold too, since the heat hasn't been on in years. My footsteps echoed on the plywood floorboards that the contractors had laid down to protect the marble underneath. I walked into the lobby. It's a huge space with high ceilings. My flashlight beam barely reached the top of the columns. I walked over to the elevator bank. Everything looked normal. No lights were on. I went over to the utility closet behind the security desk, the one with the marble top that's currently covered in plastic wrap, and checked the sub-panel. The breakers for the elevators were all in the off position. I even tried to flip one just to see, but it wouldn't budge. They were locked out with those red plastic tags. There was absolutely no power going to those motors. I sat down on a plastic crate near the elevators and waited. I kept checking my watch. 2:58 a.m., 3 a.m., 3:01 a.m. At 3:03 a.m. I heard a sound. It wasn't a loud sound, just a deep, low hum, like the sound of a large transformer vibrating. It was coming from behind the elevator doors. Then I heard the metallic clunk of a relay clicking into place. I looked up at the dial above the door of the second elevator. The needle, which had been resting at G, began to jitter. Then it slowly started to move. I stood up and walked closer. I put my hand on the bronze door. I could feel a faint vibration, a rhythmic pulsing. It felt like the entire wall was alive. The needle moved to 1, then 2. I could hear the cables in the shaft behind the door sliding. They were groaning, the way old metal does when it's under a lot of tension. I followed the needle with my eyes as it moved up the dial. It was moving at the exact speed a functioning elevator would. I stood there in the dark, with only my flashlight, watching this machine operate in a building with no electricity. I didn't feel scared exactly. I just felt really confused. It didn't make any sense. I'm not an engineer, but I know you can't move a several-ton metal box up 42 stories without a massive amount of power. The needle reached 42 and stopped. I heard the ding of the arrival bell. It was a thin, tinny sound that echoed through the empty lobby. Then the doors began to open. I stepped back a few feet. The doors retracted slowly, scraping against the tracks because they probably hadn't been greased in years. I pointed my flashlight into the elevator car. It was empty. The interior was lined with that protective padded fabric that movers use to prevent scratches. The floor was just bare metal. The light inside the car was off, but I could see the control panel. The button for the 42nd floor was glowing a faint, sickly orange. I stood there for the 4 minutes that the log had specified. Nothing happened. No one came out. No sounds came from inside the car. It just sat there with its doors open, waiting. I thought about stepping inside, but I'm not stupid. If that thing decided to move while I was halfway in, or if it got stuck between floors in a building with no power, I'd be in a lot of trouble. At 3:09 a.m., the ding sounded again. The doors groaned and slid shut. I watched the needle on the dial begin its slow trek back toward the left. It went from 42 down to G. When it reached the ground floor, the needle settled, the humming stopped, and the vibration in the wall died down. The building went back to being completely silent. I left the building pretty quickly after that. I didn't run, but I didn't linger. I walked back to my station, checked back in with Mike, and sat back down at my monitors. I watched the replay of the lobby feed. There I was, on the screen, standing in front of the elevator with my flashlight. The footage showed the doors opening to an empty car and then closing again. I've been thinking about it a lot since then. I've tried to come up with a logical explanation. Maybe there's a secondary power feed that isn't on the main blueprints. New York is full of old, undocumented infrastructure. Maybe some neighboring building is accidentally backfeeding power into the elevator grid. But that doesn't explain why it happens at the exact same time every night. I also thought about the possibility of some kind of automated maintenance cycle programmed into the elevator's logic board. But again, where is the power coming from? And why the 42nd floor? That floor is just an empty executive suite with a view of the Chrysler building. Well, the skyscraper with the pointed silver top, I mean. There's nothing up there but some old desks and rolls of insulation. I talked to one of the guys from the electrical crew a few days later. I didn't tell him what I saw. I just asked him about the elevator power. He told me that they'd actually cut the cables leading to the motor room on the roof during the first phase of the renovation to make room for new HVAC ducts. He said the elevators were physically incapable of moving because they weren't even connected to the hoist motors anymore. That part really bothered me. If the cables are cut, the car shouldn't be able to move at all, regardless of power. It should just be sitting in the pit at the bottom of the shaft. But I felt the vibration. I heard the cables. I saw the car with my own eyes. I'm still working the shift. I still watch the monitor at 3:03 a.m. I haven't gone back inside the building. Honestly, I think I'm just going to stop looking at that specific feed. Mike was probably right, in a way. It's just an old building doing weird things. Maybe it's some kind of weird pressure differential in the shaft, or some kind of mechanical memory in the metal, if that's even a thing. I read somewhere that old structures can settle in ways that create strange movements. Anyway, I'm looking for a new job. I found an opening for a junior coordinator at a firm near Battery Park. It's a day shift, which would be a nice change. I'm tired of being awake when the rest of the city is asleep. It makes you notice things that are probably better left ignored. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for the elevator. Something involving physics or old wiring that I just don't understand. But until I quit, I think I'll just keep my eyes on the other 15 monitors. There's no point in stressing over a machine that shouldn't be working. It's just a glitch. It has to be.